Right, good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm just going to start now, if that's okay with you all. I hope you guys can hear me and I hope you can see my PowerPoint. If you can't, please let me know. My name's Ella. If you've been to some of the past clinics, then you'll have seen me before, but I'm a fourth year medical student at the University of Manchester. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about top UK medical schools. That's the name of the topic. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the medical schools sort of themselves, a little fact file on them, but most of this presentation is going to be about what you should be looking for in your medical school when you're choosing which one you're going to apply for. I just thought that would be a little bit more useful for you than sitting here and talking through all 44 medical schools and what they have to offer, because there'll be some of you who just already know, I definitely want to go to a medical school in England, for example, or in the South. And so sitting there telling you about every single medical school, I thought it was a bit of a waste of time. But I'll tell you about how you can access information on each one of them and be able to build your fact files for yourself. If through at any point during this presentation you have any questions, please just leave a comment in the chat or in the Q&A box. I do know lots of people at different medical schools, so I might be able to answer questions if you do have any questions about a specific medical school. If you have questions about Manchester, I obviously will be able to answer that because I've been there for just over 4 years now. So let's start. So there are currently 44 medical schools in the UK, and that number is rapidly growing. I'm pretty sure it was in the 30s when I applied for medical school. So there are quite a lot of them now, and some of them are little baby medical schools. There's about 9,500 places each year through split between those medical schools. Obviously different ones are different sizes. For example, Manchester takes just under 500 of those places up. On average, there's about this number, just under 29,000 applicants a year. So as you can see, quite a low acceptance rate, very competitive to get into UK medical schools. And the average acceptance rate is about 16.5%. Every single person who applies for medical school is going to be very clever and will be well prepared for applying to their medical schools. They'll all have work experience. They'll all have different values and that they're going to bring to their medical school. And so it's important that you think about where you're going to apply, both where you're going to fit in and where you think you might actually get into. And all UK medical schools are good. I always get asked by people, if I go, I really want to go to Sheffield or whatever, but will that put me at a disadvantage if in the future I go up for a job interview against someone who went to Cambridge or Oxford? No, not at all. Every medical school makes you fit for practice. They're all very respectable. They all are expected to give you an education to a certain standard. And if they don't, they just get closed down. So whatever degree you come out of university with at the end will make you fit for practice. It will make you a doctor, and it's respectable, and it's more how well you've done it instead of where you've actually got your degree from. So if you're sitting there thinking Oxford and Cambridge is not for me, but I'm really worried because I'm worried it'll affect my prospects in the future because I want to do a really specific specialty and it's really competitive, whatever, don't worry too much about that, because some of the best surgeons and doctors in the UK didn't go to Oxford and Cambridge. Obviously they make fabulous doctors, but so does everywhere else. And I regularly get asked this question, so I thought I'd just include it here. The minimum age to attend UK medical schools is 18. You might be able to get on a course at the age of 17. I know some people, skip a year or come from abroad. you can get onto some courses age 17, but those courses have to have no clinical practice. So sometimes in medical school, in your first year, they'll send you for the odd day or maybe a week a year into a GP or a hospital to do some work, get a feel for what life is like as a doctor. And you have to be over 18 to actually do that aspect of medical school. I think dissection as well, you need to be over 18 depending on the school's license. So usually you've got to be over 18, but if you are 17 and trying to apply for a medical school, you might need one where there's, you know, purely theory or like a normal uni degree at the start of their how they do things. It's okay that everyone's preferences differ. I always tell people, try and think about what doctor you want to be. Some people want to go and be a super specialist neurologist or cardiothoracic surgeon, and they really want to be an expert in their subject, and they're not really that interested in the actual personal interaction. And if that's the case and you want to go do loads of research and you want to be really, really an expert in your subject, then choose a university that's more tailored to giving you very in detail knowledge, for more focusing on the theory and less so focusing on things like communication skills. If you think, I do want to be a competent doctor, but I really want to be, you know, a GP or a pediatrician where my patients really love me because I'm very good at communicating, then choose a university which has much more teaching on communication skills and early clinical practice. You know, you can say, this is what I want to be, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm interested in, and choose your course based on that. It's almost a little bit like, I'm assuming some of you watch films like Mean Girls, where they have the different cliques with the different personalities. When you join medical school, you'll see that each medical school has its own sort of personality. Similarly to every specialty has its own personality, and you just have to choose which one's the best fit for you. I really recommend going to open days. Sometimes people kind of talk about just turning up to an open day and for no real reason, they just feel like that's the place that they want to go to. That's really important, and sometimes, and you know, you just can't get those vibes of a place over the internet. So if you get the chance to go, even just to wander around the city or wander around the university campus, I really recommend you do that and just kind of see what kind of people are at that university, what, you know, what kind of vibe is there. And yeah, you'll be able to see if you can picture yourself there in the future. Talk to students at that specific med school. I can talk to you all day about, you know, whatever Lancaster Medical School, but I've never been there. I've never attended there. So I'm not really an expert on that subject. If you get a chance to talk to a student at the med school that you're interested in, then, you know, ask loads of questions. Pretty much every medical student likes to talk about medicine. So they really won't mind if you want to grill them on their experience. You can look at prospectuses. That I think everything's online nowadays, but back when I applied, you'd like get emailed prospectuses. I don't know if you still do, but they're great if you want to read more about like entry requirements and the actual content that'll be covered on the course. Pretty much every medical school will cover the same content, but then each one has slightly different added extras, if you will. Not everywhere does dissection, for example. Some universities have extra projects incorporated into their content. These might allow you to get published or might give you extra degree points, things like that. So prospectuses are good from that aspect. Websites as well, not only just the university websites themselves, but I'm not necessarily, you know, the biggest fan of websites like Student Room, but there are people who are talking about their first-hand experiences on there. So, you know, use those and see what people are saying about the different medical schools. Also, just bear in mind that if you are looking at a prospectus or a university's own website, then it will put the university or medical school in a very nice light because they are trying to encourage you to apply there. So if you're wanting to know more about I'm not saying, you know, go and ask loads about negatives of a university, but you should want to ask people, is there anything you don't like about your medical school? Just so you get a nice rounded picture. You won't find those in prospects and websites, so make sure you're doing research by asking students as well. Try not to copy friends and family. I know it's really daunting when you're in, you know, sixth form, you're thinking about going to university, and maybe you're looking at a university that's the other side of the country to where you're currently living, and that's very daunting, and I understand that. I was there. But try not to apply somewhere just because a friend or family member's there. Yeah, a lot of people who go to university end up splitting up with their boyfriends or girlfriends, or not speaking to their old friends as much as they used to. So don't base your choice on that. So things you should consider: course length and content. Course lengths vary in medicine. Just think, how many years can you afford? How many years do you want to do? Is there anything extra you want to get out of your degree? For example, a longer course length generally comes with extra projects and extra research. If that's something you're interested in, then maybe you want to do a longer course. And again, content, just those added extras. You will have to do every specialty of medicine while you're at medical school. If you're not interested in psychiatry because you really want to be a surgeon, sort of tough luck. You will have to do a placement in psychiatry, and you will have to do your theory on it. But it's just those added extras that they might offer you. That you should be thinking about. Option to intercalate. Intercalation might not be something you guys have heard of. I hadn't heard of it before I went to university, but some people had. That just means taking a year or two out of medicine to go and take a different degree. Usually it's just a normal 3-year degree, but you just sort of fit it into 1 year, and usually it's medical related, so it could be neuroscience, it could be psychology, it could be ethics and law of medicine, it could be anything, and you get an extra degree out of doing that. You might even get a master's or a PhD. I know people who are doing a PhD intercalation at the moment in cancer research. All universities should let you intercalate, but it's whether it's sort of what courses they have and whether they let you go to other universities to do your intercalation. Most will let you do that, but you know, if it's something you're interested in, think about it. Extracurricular, I'll talk about that more in a bit. Location, do you want to be close to your family? Do you want to move very far away? Is there a specific city that you really like that you're thinking of going to? Location is important. Even do you want to be in a city or a campus? Do you want to be in the middle of nowhere? They're all very important, and just think about what you'll enjoy. Also within that, think about what kind of doctor do I want to be? Do I want to work in a rural practice in the future, or do I want to work in a busy city A&E? If you already know, oh yeah, I really want to work in a busy city A&E, that going to a university like Manchester is really great, because your last 3 years are going to be placement years, and you're going to be in very busy hospitals in the middle of a city. Whereas if you go somewhere, I'm trying to think, like you know, St Andrews, or maybe even like Kiel, it's slightly more in the middle of nowhere, and you might be experiencing more rural placements. So obviously, if you go to like a very busy city university, it doesn't mean that you can't work rurally in the future, but it's just letting you get a feel for what you might be interested in. So something to think about. Some of you, cost won't be important, but for some of you it will be very important. There are loads of websites online that run down things like the average cost of a pint of beer in a city, the types of nightlife and the costs of those, the cost of public transport, cost of accommodation. There are loads of websites. Do your research into it, because there's quite a big variety in all of those things. For example, at Manchester, I know the cheapest halls of accommodation is about £95 a week, whereas there are some places where the cheapest halls are £150 a week. It's a big difference. I'm just going to briefly talk about UK versus abroad. I know I'm meant to be talking about UK universities, but I don't think in any of these webinars there is time really to talk about going to university abroad, so I thought I'd just summarise it quickly. So UK medical school, obviously closer to home, and will give you experience of life as a doctor in the UK if you want to stay in the UK as a doctor. You already are going to have loads of information on applying to UK medical school. It's going to be really easily available to you, because if anyone else at the school, for example, has gone on to study medicine, then they'll have already been through it. Really easy to access all that information. The cost per year of a UK medical school, if you're an English student, this is, I've just seen a question about the cost of Scottish university, and I do believe if you're a Scottish citizen and you go to Scottish university, it is free. But if you're an English student, for example, then the cost will be £9,250 a year tuition fee. You usually get that through student loan for your first 4 years of medical school. That might increases all the time. You are also eligible for student loan and then NHS bursary. Don't worry about NHS bursary, that's something you have to do in your 5th and 6th year. But for your first 4 years, you can apply for student loan. You can only apply for that if you're going to university in the UK, though. And basically you can take out the amount of money required for the tuition fee each year, and then depending on your household income, you will also get a maintenance loan to contribute towards your living costs. And the course length is 5 to 6 years. So American medical schools, they're not really that popular in the UK. Not many people are that interested in them. It's a postgraduate degree only that you can do there. So you have to take a 4-year pre-med degree in the US. Usually it's biology or chemistry, something like that. Then after that, you apply for medical school, and then you do 4 years of medical school. So it's all in all an 8-year course, if you want to think about it like that. You do have to take an application, like an applicant test, similar to the UCAT or BMAT, and it's called the MCAT. It's kind of similar to the UCAT, but with American, it's less competitive in that there's less people per place applying, but everything is very tricky, requires you to be very, on it and practice hard. They have over 150 medical schools in the US, which is obviously a lot, and each of those are absolutely massive. So loads of places available. If you are thinking of applying to America, just be careful though, because their sort of definition of a doctor is a little bit different to ours, and not all medical schools give you a license to practice afterwards. So for example, like holistic medicine over there is still counted as medicine, so just be a bit careful there. Yeah, less competition, higher requirements, very expensive. They don't have a blanket cost for all of their degrees. So depending on which university you were thinking of going to, it can get very, very expensive. Also, the living costs over there are very expensive as well. But one big positive is you take the USMLE during the course, so that's required of you when you take as you're doing your degree. And for those of you who don't know, the USMLE is the sort of licensing exam in the US. So if you've got a UK degree and you're thinking of moving to the US to work, you'll have to take this exam. So it is a difficult exam, but at least you kind of are taking it during your course, and then you're automatically able to work in the US after. So I guess that's the positive of going to the US for medical school. European medical schools are much more popular with the UK students. They have a lot of English-speaking medical schools all over Europe. Obviously, just check if you are going to apply that it is in a language you are able to speak, because you don't want to turn up and speak in, whatever language. Whatever degree you get from these European medical schools will be recognised in the UK. You'll be allowed to practice in the UK as long as the med school is in the European Economic Area. You just have to check. But basically, a lot of those degrees are recognised. They can be a lot cheaper, at being about £6,000 a year, which is, you know, 3.5 grand less than UK schools. And they are much less competitive. They have much lower grade requirements. So I know a lot of people who didn't get into UK medical school and so decided to apply abroad and just went and studied abroad in different European, specifically places like Bulgaria, Romania, places like that, quite easy to get into, and you get a degree that means you can practice as a doctor when you come back. The negative is that they do work in a slightly different way to UK medical schools. On the whole, as soon as you get into UK medical school, you're pretty much good. You're pretty much definitely going to be a doctor unless you do something very illegal or very wrong, because all that happens is if you fail an exam, you reset a year, and you keep resetting the year till you pass. Whereas sometimes European medical schools are a little bit more cutthroat, and I know in Switzerland they like to cull people out. So after the first year, they only take on like the top 25% of people. The top 25% of grades will be able to move on. So just look into your specific medical school if you are thinking of Europe. But it is an option out there if you are thinking you're not going to get as higher grades, or it's something you're interested in. It's a popular option. So course options in the UK, there are basically 5 types of courses offered by medical schools. These are the 5 of them. So undergrad medicine is what most of you will be applying to do and will be interested in doing. Like I've already said, it's 5 or 6 years, and at the end you earn a primary medical qualification, things like an MBCHB or an MBBS, which basically mean you can practice as a doctor once you've qualified, once you've finished university. That 6th year usually is an intercalation, but you're not necessarily required to do one. You don't need a previous degree to do an undergrad medical course. You usually just need A-levels or IBs or whatever it is you're taking. And undergrad medical places will make up majority of the med school places. But it is worth thinking that people who are on an undergrad course are from all walks of life. They've come from all over. It's often meshed with the graduate medicine and foundation medicine courses. And just if you already have a degree, you might still want to apply to do an undergrad medicine degree instead of doing graduate medicine, just because it's slightly easier to get onto because there's more places available. So you don't need a degree, but some people on the course will have a degree already and be a little bit older. Postgrad medicine is an option as well, but not massively a popular one because of it being very, very competitive. So usually it's 4 years, but sometimes it can be 5 years if you decide to intercalate. And you must have a previous degree. Depending on the university, that degree will have to be in something medicine related. Some other universities don't mind as much if it's a slightly more off-piste, degree, and you usually need to have a 2-1 in your degree to get onto a postgrad medicine course. It's much more intense because you do exactly the same content as an undergrad degree, but you're just trying to fit it into 4 years instead of 5. So especially the first couple of years are very intense. It's not many places. Not every university offers postgrad. There are some universities which only offer postgrad, one of which I'm talking about later. But there's a couple of them where you have to have a degree to go there. So if you really want to go to that university, then you kind of pigeonholed into having to do another degree first. And you get the same qualification you'd get if you did undergrad med. So it's not something that anyone, I think, ever really goes out thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to be a postgrad medic. It's more that if you're doing a degree like biomed and then you change your mind and think, oh, I want to be a doctor, then you kind of will take postgrad medicine, and it's slightly shorter just so you're not at university forever. So foundation courses, they come in like 2 different forms, sometimes called like preliminary or gateway years. they're basically 1 year that you take before you start an undergrad medicine course. So technically a foundation course is 1 year, but with medicine, it ends up being 6 or 7 years. And ultimately what it is it's 1 year of general science orientated content. They teach you how to write essays and things, basically just the very basics. And you just do that for a year before you join the normal medicine cohort. And then after you join the undergrad students. You don't get an extra degree by doing a foundation course. It's more that you're wanting to do medicine and you either don't have the right subjects, you don't have the right subjects, you are not able to get good enough grades, or you, for some reason, come from like a socially disadvantaged area. So I know Manchester's, you have to come from an area around Manchester, or specifically around Preston as well. And if you come from certain areas where the schooling isn't as good as like the national average, or there's any other reasons why you don't have equal opportunity as everyone else to get into medicine, then they have certain spaces on foundation courses for those students. And the grades to get onto a foundation course are usually B's and C's instead of A's and A stars. So that's kind of the role of foundation course. Again, no one ever really goes out thinking, I want to do a foundation course. It's more that you want to do medicine, but you don't have the right subject, or you don't have the right degree, or you haven't got your grades. Then you can take a foundation course and you just do the year, and then you can take medicine after that. The allied health professions, it's not the same as a medical degree, but if you're thinking, actually, I'm not sure if medicine's right for me, these are other degrees which you can take if you're interested in them. I really do recommend nursing, midwifery, physio, psychology, things like that at university, especially if you're very interested in a specific subject. They have lower grade requirements and you join placement much earlier. So if you are a really hands-on person, recommend allied health professions. Yeah, that's fine. And the courses are usually 3 years, which is obviously a lot shorter, cheaper. You get sort of on the housing ladder, things like that, much earlier with allied health professions. Dentistry, pharmacy, and veterinary science. I'm not sure whether anyone here wants to do any of those subjects, but they're very similar to medicine in how they run, especially dentistry and pharmacy. Dentistry and pharmacy are usually 5 years. Veterinary science really varies in how long it is. But obviously just have a different focus to medicine. And again, can be very placement based, more so than medicine. And the application process is very, very similar. So I'm not going to talk about it much because I don't know loads about these subjects, but the option's there if you're interested. And then the last option are like science degrees. These can be 3 or 4 years, depending on what type of degree you're wanting to do. There's loads of different choices of subject, opportunities for year abroad and placements, flexible modules, and it's more labs and lecture based than the things you might cover in medicine. They have shorter contact hours. You do have to do more essays and projects, but there's more time for extracurricular and the sort of normal uni experience than medicine. Almost all of you, I don't know how much you guys know about the actual UCAS application process yet. Some of you will have properly looked into it, some of you might have no clue, but you can only apply to 4 medical schools, and that leaves you with 1 extra UCAS choice, one extra opening. And so a lot of people who apply for 4 medical schools will apply for a 5th science subject, just in case they don't get into medicine, and then they have the option to go and do a different degree. So most of you will look into science degrees as well. Typically it's biomed that people choose, but if you're specifically interested in something like anatomy or neuroscience, you can easily put that as your 5th option instead. So I'm going to talk a little bit about things you should be thinking about when you're choosing which medical school is right for you. So I think the term top UK medical schools is quite misleading, because a lot of you will be very interested in the like league tables that are published every year telling you which is the best medical school in the country. But I think you need to focus more on what's going to be the top medical school for you. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the factors that should go into deciding whether it is right for you or not. The first is teaching. There are 3 types of teaching. Well, there are generally 3 types of teaching that go on in medical school. The first is traditional, which is the oldest type of teaching. Basically what that means is you have lectures each week, and then you go home and you're asked to write an essay on whatever the topic of the lectures was that week. It's very similar to the teaching you'll have experienced in your A-levels. It's kind of going out of fashion now. It's not seen in loads of places. The next option is purely PBL based. And what that ultimately is you're given a case, a clinical case. So for example, this is a 17-year-old girl who's short. Yeah, someone's raised their hand. Do you want to just pop a message in the chat? I'll keep going, but if you've got a question, just pop it in the chat and I'll keep an eye on the chat box as well. Okay, so PBL based, you're basically given a case. So for example, 17-year-old girl, short of breath, here is 2 pages of information about her medical history. And then from that, you break that information down and you say, oh, actually, I don't know the causes of shortness of breath in a teenager or whatever. And then you go home and you've got all these questions about this case that you've come up with as a group. And you go away and research the answers to those, and you come back to the same group and you discuss what you found out. It is very similar to the learning you will experience as a doctor. So everyone here will have PBL-based learning at some point of their career. It's just whether you want to have that form part of your medical school experience or not. And then like the most common one now is integrated learning, which is just a mixture of those 2 styles. So like I said, traditional is lecture-based. Also, by the way, I'm getting a lot of questions coming through. Unless it's a question that's like, oh, I just missed a slide, I'm just going to answer them all at the end. I have seen them and I'm not ignoring them. So traditional is lecture-based, like I've just said, and essay and project-based as well. Really strong focus on like the science and the pathology and actually understanding the mechanism of what's going on in people's bodies when there is disease there. And usually the way it works is they have very sort of sectioned parts of the degree where they have a very theory-based pre-clinical couple of years, so 2 or 3 years where they really focus on that science. And then in their later years, they'll focus on how to apply that clinically, as well as the clinical skills. Things like taking blood and stuff, I mean by clinical skills. Lots of essays and written work, usually like a couple of essays a week, 1 or 2 essays a week. And for example, Oxbridge, really traditional. And just really traditional. There are not that many other universities that use it. PBL based. If anyone's got any questions about PBL, feel free to ask. Manchester was the university that invented PBL learning. So we are a complete PBL-based university, so I can answer any questions you have on it. Like I said, you're given a clinical case, and then in groups of between 8 and 12 people, you will discuss the case in front of a tutor who is an expert on the subject and ask questions and then go home and research the questions. It's like how doctors learn. It's very hands-on. You are in charge of your learning, They obviously make sure you've learned what you need to, but then you have this opportunity to go into more detail on things that you're interested in. There are fewer or no essays in a PBL-based university. It's one of the best things about Manchester. We have one essay a year, that is it. And those essays are 5,000 to 10,000 words, but you are given a long time to do them. We basically have no written work. Everything that is assessed is assessed by attending groups and contributing verbally, and then also placement and being assessed on how good you are on placement, basically. So if you're not an essay person, PBL-based universities are maybe a really good option for you, because obviously it's a lot less than one a week. But this is now being incorporated in some form in pretty much every medical school. I think even Oxford and Cambridge in their later years use some sort of case-based learning. So integrated, it's just a mix. And usually you have lectures. So PBL-based universities do also have lectures. We just have a lot fewer of them. And they usually come after you've done the case. Integrated styles are more that you would have a lecture and then you would given a clinical case and asked to apply what you've learned to those clinical cases. And they often have early clinical experience involved very early on, as do PBL universities. And you can kind of think of it as a stepping stone between how you've been learning in school and then how you would learn as a doctor. So a little bit of a mix of both, just to start getting you used to it before you have to fully, learn based on cases as a doctor. You will also see different learning styles, like names of different learning styles being thrown around, things like TCD, which is themed case discussion, evidence case learning, things like this. They basically all mean the same thing. They either mean PBL or integrated. I think it's just some universities trying to avoid the stigma of PBL, but also kind of just say that they're sort of trying to do it in their own kind of way. So don't be thrown off by that. Ultimately, think, is it more lecture-based or is it more clinical case-based? And then decide which of those two you like and base your decisions off that. I do really recommend clinical case-based learning. It makes you feel like a doctor much earlier on, and also it's quite difficult if you've learned just the basic science and then you kind of go into a hospital setting and they say, why is X, Y, Z happening? And you're trying to apply the knowledge, but you've never done that before. That is quite difficult. So I do recommend clinical case-based learning, because you do that basically from the start of your degree. Other things to consider is, do you want to do full body human dissection? It's not offered in that many medical schools anymore. There's only like a handful of them that actually do it. And most medical schools now use prosection, which basically means they do the dissection and you watch, or they use models to teach you. Manchester does full body dissection, as do a couple of others. If it's something you're really interested in, then just bear that in mind while you're choosing which medical school you're going to. I am definitely not going to be a surgeon, and dissection was not my favourite time of the week, but I do really appreciate that the first time I put a scalpel to skin was not on a living patient. So, I do recommend dissection, even if you're kind of a bit squeamish. Think about early clinical experience. Goes back to what I was saying about what type of doctor do you want to be. If you really want to be someone who's very good with patients and managing the patient experience, then you might want early clinical experience. If you're thinking, I definitely just want to go into research, it might not be important to you. Again, indication I've already talked about. Thinking about extra qualifications, do you have the option to produce work which is going to be published in the future? Or, extra degrees, things like that, which can be included within the actual course. And then course length, what did you talk about that? So application, so the two main tests in the UK are UCAT and BMAT. Most of you all know this already. Most universities require the UCAT. It's a problem-solving test, which is split into 5 sections. I'm not going to go into it much today. It's sat on a computer. and you get results as soon as you finish the UCAT. This is something that a lot of people don't know, but it's the biggest difference between UCAT and BMAT when coming to choose where you're applying. You get your results as soon as you leave that UCAT, you leave the room you're sitting your UCAT in. You're given a sheet of paper, they're all there. And from that, you can also see how well you've done compared to people who've already sat the test. Then you can say, oh, you know, I got in the 700s, that's a very good score. I know that UCAT universities are going to look at that and say, oh, yeah, you know, great, that's not going to be a hindrance to my application. So that's really, really useful. You can see whether you've done well or not on the UCAT as soon as you've sat it. And you sit it once a year, you can't resit it in the same year. And if you are reapplying for medicine in a separate year, you have to sit it again. The BMAT more focuses on academic content. There's an essay writing portion. It's usually written on paper, although I don't know with COVID whether they changed that. And then there's also sort of questions on GCSE level science, although it's not easy GCSE level science. You get your results for BMAT after you've sent your UCAS application in, which means when you apply to university, you don't know what your score for BMAT was. You don't know if you did well or not. That's really important because if you're only looking at BMAT universities, then you are kind of going in blindly because you don't know whether they're all going to see your BMAT results and reject you because you've not done very well. That's something that a lot of people don't know, and it's really important to bear in mind. It's why people will say to you, if you're interested in BMAT universities, you should also sit the UCAT and think about applying to at least one UCAT university, just because then you have that, you know, backup option where you already know where you stand with them. The way schools will look at the UCAT and BMAT will vary massively, and you can find this on their websites, and there's loads of other websites which also talk about this, so I'm not going to tell you what each school does itself, but the three different approaches they will use for UCAT and BMAT is either a cut-off method, where they say everyone who got below 600 or whatever, I've just plucked that number out of the air, but let's say they say, oh, everyone who's under 600 automatically reject them, for example. The other is like a contextual interpretation, so where they think, you know, these scores aren't that important to them, but they will, if they're trying to decide between applicants, they'll come back later and look at the UCAT and BMAT and think, in the context of this individual's application, is this really relevant or not? Basically, that's what that means. And then combined with other aspects of the application, so sometimes universities will use like a scoring system where, you know, if you do very well in the UCAT, you might get a 5, and if you don't do as well, you get a 1, but then your GCSEs are also marked in the same way, so your scores rack up, and if you do very well in other aspects of your application, it doesn't matter as much. They're the different ways they might look at it, but you can go online and they have to be transparent about the way that they look at these results, so they should tell you. Another thing with application to think about is panel versus MMI interviews. So do you want to sit and do one interview, which is what a panel interview is, or would you like to do multiple stations? You do it all on the same day, there's usually about 10 stations. Each has pros and cons. It depends what you're like as a person. Maybe you're the kind of person who finds it really difficult to talk to someone at first, but warms up after a few minutes. Then panel will suit you way more than MMI because you're not having to see so many different examiners. But if you're the kind of person who, when you slip up, you panic, then panel's maybe not for you, because like, at least with MMI, if you mess up one station, you can just move on to the next, and failing one station doesn't mean you won't get an offer. So it depends what kind of person you are. Yeah, one's longer, one's shorter. There are differences in the content. Usually panel interviews are a little bit more academic, a bit more formal, whereas MMI often has role plays and weirder stations, I suppose, which test your problem solving abilities, things like that. And then MMIs are similar to something called CCAs, also previously called OSCEs. You'll call them CCAs when you come to medical school. They are the exams you take we take them every semester. Some universities take them every year. They're like a practical exam you do. It's basically exactly the same as an MMI, but testing your knowledge. So it's, again, something that you guys are all going to have to get used to. So it's depending whether you want to, push it back a bit or not. And MMI is the most common interview you'll see. Panel is, again, really only used in Oxford and Cambridge. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but any other ones that do panel. Extracurricular is very, very, very important. Medicine is a long degree and it's a hard degree, and you need to have hobbies and a life outside of medicine in order for you to cope, otherwise you'll just burn out. Things to think about when you're applying to university and choosing which medical school is the best one for you. You want to have a look at their MedSoc. Do you have to pay to be part of the MedSoc or not? What kind of societies does the MedSoc have? Do they run extra events? So for example, Manchester MedSoc think it's very important that they encourage their students to, get out and do things. So they organize loads of events, loads of like balls, but also things like bowling, stuff like that, to encourage you to meet new people. So think about, what is the role of the MedSoc? Do they do what you want them to do? What societies are available both in the MedSoc and in the wider university? Is sports really important to you? Well, then have a look at what sports societies are available. At Manchester, the sports societies are split between medical sports societies in general, and the difference is that the medical ones are more flexible. You don't have to go to training every week, and the timings will fit better with placement timings. So yeah, nightlife is, if it's something you're interested in. If you're not a big nightlife person, that's absolutely fine. Look at, the activities that you can do on weekends or in the day. But basically what I'm trying to get at with that is what are the opportunities to go out and do new things. Days out, there you go. Part-time jobs. Famously, some of the Cambridge colleges didn't let the students have part-time jobs. But this was back when I was applying. I don't know if they still do it. But look, is it possible for you to have a part-time job? Do students at the university have part-time jobs? Do they think it's manageable with the amount of work that the university asks them to do? And also, what is the availability of part-time jobs around the area of the university? Obviously, if you're in the middle of nowhere and there's no part-time jobs available, then there's no point even thinking about having one. So if it's important and you need to have a part-time job, something to ask about when you go on open days and talk to students, because it's obviously going to be important to you. Again, cost I've already talked about, and location I've already talked about. Student satisfaction, also very, very important. Is your university supportive, especially if you have specific needs? For example, if you're dyslexic or you have mental health problems, or you're going to need a little bit extra support when you come to university, look into what that university offers, because it's very important, especially when you come to your placement years, your later years, such as I'm in now. They are very difficult. They're a bit of a shock to the system. You want to know the student satisfaction. Was that university supportive? Was the facilities good? Things like that. So when it comes to assessing, how good universities are, let's say you've gone through all of those different factors and putting them aside for the second, you can look at league tables. This one is from the Complete University Guide, specifically under the medicine subsection. So this basically is a table that just lays out the top medical schools in the UK, and it splits down their score into different subsections, I guess. So you can go and look and say, oh, which universities has the highest student satisfaction? Or I'm really interested in research. Let me see how research intensive that university is. I don't recommend looking at graduate prospects for any, because you're pretty much guaranteed a job if you want to be a doctor after medical school. So Yeah, this is a really good one. This is the one 6med recommends you look at. There's loads of others, like newspapers always like to publish them. Basically, if you go anywhere, if you look on loads of different websites, it'll be different on every single one of them. But this is the one 6med recommends. It might surprise some of you that Swansea came up top and beat Oxford and Cambridge, beat Cambridge by quite a way. But you know, I read the whole of the league table and I was pretty surprised by the rankings, but it's just because it bases it on so many different factors. If you went and looked at student satisfaction purely, it would be very different to sort of research quality. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the league tables, but it's an interesting read if that's important to you, if you want a university that, you know, scores highly on a league table. It's also worth noting that these little arrows just below the rankings, they tell you how much the university's risen or fallen in the last year. So you'll see like that Swansea has risen 9 places. I'm pretty sure Manchester's now 19th or something like that out of 44, and they rose like 12 places. So you might want to look at those rankings as well, because that shows that universities made some changes and they will be continuing to rise usually, or potentially continuing to fall. I've done a little fact file on the top 5 of that league table, just so you can kind of get a feel for the different universities that are ranked top. I'm just trying to show you that there's a big variety between them, and you'll see that like the top 4 universities all scored 100% in the overall score. So most of them score in the 90s. So they're all great. There's a big variety in the top. I'm just, you know, going to give you a brief outline of each of these. So Swansea came first. Swansea, from what I can tell, only offers graduate medicine. I really spent a long time researching this, and I couldn't find any undergrad medicine courses in Swansea at the moment. It might be why it scored so highly, because graduate medics already have another degree, they're a bit older, they're very clever, and it's competitive, so the students are going to be very good. The requirements for Swansea was to get a 2-1 in an undergrad degree. You can get a first, a 2-1, a 2-2, or a third, I think. So you need a 2-1 or higher in your undergrad degree, or if you've got a PhD or a master's, you just need to pass that, and then that's the requirements they need. And you have to sit something called the GAMSAT if you do graduate medicine. The student satisfaction was 85%, that's very high, and you'll be able to go onto their website and see exactly why the student satisfaction was so high. Usually it's broken down to saying what facilities they have, the support, etc. The actual course as well. Research quality 87%, and graduate prospects 100%. Oxford came second. They offer undergrad med as well as postgrad med, I'm pretty sure. They require 1 A*, 2 A's, and you have to take the BMAT for Oxford. They interview in a traditional style. They don't do MMIs, and their research quality was 86%, and the graduate prospects were 95%. I couldn't find what their student satisfaction rate was for some reason. I don't know where that's gone, or if they just don't survey it, maybe. So I can't tell you what the student satisfaction is like, unfortunately. I know one person who studies at Oxford and he likes it, so there you go. Dundee was third. They offer undergraduate medicine, 3 A's, an A-level requirement, or they have so many different requirements for all the different qualifications that you guys will be taking at the moment. So if you didn't take A-levels, go onto the websites and they offer the alternative. I just decided to put the A-level grades down because it would be the most relatable to most of you. And they need UCAS as well. Student satisfaction 86, really good again. Research quality 76, and graduate prospects 100%. one of the points that I just wanted to make with these top 5 was that you'll be able to see that as we flick through like Oxford, Dundee, and then Cambridge, like their grade requirements are all very different, and grade requirements goes into these rankings usually. So a lower grade requirement usually bumps them up the rank a bit more. Undergrad medicine at Cambridge came 4th. You need 2 A stars and an A, and the BMAT traditional interview. That's what we already talked about. The student satisfaction was 80%, research quality 86, graduate prospects 99. For those of you who are looking at Oxbridge, you'll know that they have different colleges, and within each different college, there will also vary in what facilities and student satisfaction and things that are available. Edinburgh was 5th. Undergrad medicine again, 3 A's in the UCAS. MMI interview, student satisfaction 80%, research quality 86%, and graduate prospects 99%. Scotland is very well known for having good medical schools. That's why they score very highly on the league tables. So that's all I have on my presentation. If you have questions about specific medical schools, you can try and ask them, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. There are 2 other tutors who run these webinars. If you've come to the webinars regularly, you'll know who they are. They're called Joe and Shruti, and I don't think they go to Manchester. So if you have questions about their medical schools, I'm sure they won't mind you asking them on a separate webinar. That should be fine, I would have thought. But you can always try me, and I'll see what I know about different medical schools. Or if you've got any general questions about application and choosing a medical school, then feel free to ask them now. I've got quite a few questions already on the chat, so I'm going to start by doing those. Someone said, will we be able to get this recording? I believe you can. I believe they'll send it to you. Why do Oxford and Cambridge have an extra year on this course? I think it's just because of how intensive their science aspect of their degree is. Like in Manchester, your first year in Manchester is very science related, more breaking down the basics. And then even from your second year, you're going into that clinical mindset. Whereas I believe Oxford and Cambridge do have multiple years of that basic science. It's not basic there, it's very in-depth, but how I'm trying to say it is science that's not been applied to clinical cases yet. So I think they have the extra year on the course just because of how in detail they go. It's just a longer course, it's just how they do it. I don't think with Oxford and Cambridge you get an extra degree. It might have changed, but when I applied, Nottingham used to be a 6-year course, but you used to get an extra degree out of it. I don't think you do with Oxford and Cambridge, but I'm searching for like a timeline for a non-UK resident student who wants to study medicine. Like, do I need to study a foundation year and then apply for admissions and so on? So depending on what qualifications you have as a non-UK resident, you shouldn't need to study a foundation year. I know a lot of people who just came as an international student to study in the UK. So you will, providing you don't already have a degree, you will need to apply for an undergrad medical course. If you go onto the specific university websites, they have information on how to apply as an international student. Obviously, I've lived in the UK my whole life, so I've never done it personally, but you don't need to do a foundation year course unless you don't have the right qualifications. So usually your qualifications will be fine as long as they've been in subjects such as chemistry, biology, those kind of subjects, sciencey ones. But you should be fine. If you go on the university websites, they'll explain how to apply. The thing just to bear in mind with the non-UK resident is that you have to pay higher fees than the £9,500. I think it's closer to £25,000 a year. But yeah, in terms of actual application, just go on the websites and they'll explain how to do it, I'm sure. What have I done my A-levels in science? I'm not a UK resident, so the foundation year in medicine would be a good idea to start with for medicine. So if you did A-levels, yeah, absolutely fine, as long as you did an A-level in chemistry. That's what most of them require, and then an A-level in another science. Then you should be fine. You shouldn't need a foundation year. They aren't easy to get onto, foundation years, because I would say if you're not that confident, for example, in like speaking English, or you're not going to be that confident in how a UK medical school runs, then potentially think about a foundation year, but they're not super easy to get onto. Most international students that I know just came straight into first year like any UK resident would. So as long as your qualifications fit what the university is asking for, you should just be able to apply straight out, from what I understand. Yeah. The other option, if you're a European, is to go to a European medical school, and then you can do Erasmus years, which are like what they call it, like exchange student kind of things, where you come over for a year and study in a UK medical school. So if you're not sure you want to commit to a full 5-year course in the UK, that's another option where you can apply to do a year in the UK and then the rest of it wherever in the wherever in Europe. There are like loads of different ways of doing it. Do I need to take English exams? How do I prepare myself for admission tests? Yeah, someone's commented on that comment saying just check, each individual university will be different for requirements for international students. If your English is good enough, you shouldn't need, I can't remember what they call it, but there's basically like a test to do to just check your fluency in English. But if you know you speak English well, it's not something you should worry about. Is studying, oh yeah, what else about that? I don't understand anything on UCAS. How can I apply? To the person who asked, I don't understand anything on UCAS, how can I apply? Can you just try and like elaborate a little bit more in another comment what you mean by that? Do you just mean you don't know how to work it, or what they expect of you? Do I know anything about Army bursary? I know people who've done it, but I don't know loads myself. I know you have to, I know it's a good option if you want to go and work in the army in the future, but if you do get it, I think you're contracted to work a certain amount of years. It's quite a lot of years, so only do it if you're 100% sure that's what you want to do in the future. I know then you have to do some basic army training as well as your university degree. I think you do that afterwards, and usually it's easy to get onto if you've done cadets, things like that. That's all I know about it. I'm not a super expert on it, but I do know 1 or 2 people who've done it. Someone said, what do A-levels mean? They're just the qualifications that you take in the UK and some other countries. It's the ones you take around the age of 18. International baccalaureate's another one. Obviously, if you're in the US or other countries, you'll have different versions. that's fine. Universities do accept more than just A levels. Just go onto their websites and they will break down what exact requirements for each of the different type of qualification that they're looking for. But basically, yeah, it's just saying what grades did you get around the age of 18. Someone said, can I do the UCAT BMAT more than once until I get the grades that I want? Yeah, of course you can, but you can only take the exam once a year. So, or once a season, I guess, if you want to think of it like that. So if you're going to apply for next year, then you'll take it in the coming summer. So if you're applying in September to December time, then you'll take your UCAT and BMAT in this coming summer. You then can't retake it until the next summer. But in theory, you can take it as many times as you want. It just has to be once a year. And so many people will, even if they don't get the grades that they want, will still apply each season just to see if they can get an offer. And usually if you get an offer for interview, they don't really look at your UCAT or BMAT score again. So, you know, if you get an offer for interview, you should be okay. Also, there are a lot of different, like a lot of the UCAT grades, for example, are accepted. It's just because you weren't in the top 10% of people doesn't mean that you're not going to get an offer. So it's usually the top half of people will still get an offer. And I know people who are in the bottom 10% who still got invited to interview. So don't stress about it too much, but yes, you can keep doing it until you get the grades you want, just once a year. Can we apply for medicine and science to the same uni, or should we apply to different universities? I applied for my fifth. I applied for biomed at Manchester. You are allowed to apply for multiple courses at the same university. Just look at what their grade requirements are, because it would be silly to apply to one which has the same grades as medicine. So try and look for one that maybe is like ABB or around that kind of level. But absolutely fine to apply to the same university. If you're really wanting to go to a specific university, then it's a good option to do, especially like, I know Manchester does it, I don't know which other universities do, but some universities, if you do a course like biomed or biology kind of courses, after the first year, the top like 2% of people on that course get offered the opportunity to switch to medicine. And then they just switch and go into second year medicine, basically. Or first year. I think it depends on which university you're at. So if you really, really want to go to a specific university, I would recommend putting your fifth option at that university, because you might have the option to do something like that or transfer later. What is the reference letter when we apply in UCAS? From what I remember, reference letters used to, if I get this wrong, please feel free to correct me, anyone who knows. But a reference letter in UCAS, from what I remember, is when you're like, I think when I applied, the school submitted our applications, they would include a reference letter. So usually you ask a teacher or a headmistress or someone, or a headmaster, to write a reference letter for you, which just sums up what kind of student you are. I suppose you could also get, if you already had a degree, you know, a degree tutor, or if you had a job, someone you worked for to do it, but usually it's a teacher who will write that for you. If you're abroad and submitting your UCAS form yourself and a school isn't doing it for you, still ask a teacher to write that, and then you should be able to, you know, copy and paste it in. One second. Also, if any of you don't have any more questions, feel free to leave at any point. I understand you want to enjoy your Sunday evening, and I'll get Okay, what do we need in the personal statement? So cover this in like some of the other webinars. So I'd recommend you just email the 6med team and ask for copies of the webinars, because I did one where I went into a lot of detail with personal statement, but ultimately you just need to sum up your motivation for medicine, which is why you want to do medicine. Usually people use a bit of an anecdote. They'll say, you know, oh, my little brother went into hospital when I was younger and then I realized I wanted to be a doctor. And then talk about how you developed your passion, whether you did any extra courses, any extra reading, what you did to develop your interest, find out what medicine was right for you. If you did any work experience, what work experience did you do, and what you learn from those experiences. And then you can also add things like hobbies or extra jobs and what you learn from those, what you're interested in, stuff like that. You can also include those. This year, there were lots of people who didn't get places due to COVID last year. Do you think there'll be an impact on the 2023 cohort? I think it's starting to sort itself out a little bit more. But I know in the first couple of years of COVID, it was a massive problem. I think, if I'm going to be honest, in the past couple of years, they've increased the number of places by multiple thousands for medical school. So the year before I applied, I think it was like 1,000 or 1,500 places less than they currently offer for medicine each year. So in theory, yes, they did mess it up and made it a little bit, and made it so that there was this sort of backlog of people, so they had fewer places to hand out. But actually, if you go back a few years, it's not that it's more competitive now than it was. It's just that they tried to make it easier for more people to come and study medicine, and then they kind of messed up, which is kind of cancelled out that effect, I suppose. So yes, it's harder than it technically should have been, but you know, it's as competitive as it was a few years ago, and they are now getting to the point where they've almost caught up a little bit on that backlog. So hopefully you guys should be okay, especially if you're applying for next year. I have a feeling they might actually increase the number of places again, because there's been a lot of talk recently about there not being enough doctors in the NHS. So I think they're trying to increase the number of places again. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but you know, medical school, it's competitive. So I'm sorry, I guess. How can we BMAT or UCAT by ourselves? I mean, like staying at home to prepare for the exam. Depends what works for you, I guess. I recommend books. Like, you can get textbooks with, like, they're usually called like 1,500 UCAT questions, and you can go through the different questions in the different sections and work through them. That's what I did. I got a book off an older medical student who didn't use it anymore, like a secondhand kind of book. Usually you can buy them on eBay for very, very cheap, because medical students just flog them once they get into uni. And then start well in advance, and then just gradually go through some of those questions. Try and do, you know, like even 15 minutes a day of just doing a few questions, just to get a feel for how the questions work and to kind of get your brain into gear. Because one of the main issues is that they're really strange questions that you probably have never done before, and especially things like pattern recognition, it's about how much you do them more than actually being able to learn what the answers are. So I would do that, and then as you come up to closer to your exams, go on the UCAT website, and they have a question bank and past paper question, like a past paper, and it's set up exactly the same way you would do the UCAT in real life. So I would do that just closer to the UCAT, so that you get a feel for how the computer actually works in the exam, how to use the like little on-screen calculator, because you're not allowed to take your own calculator in. And that does it on a timer so that you can see how you would actually do if that was your real UCAT test. So that's how I say with UCAT. So get some questions. Even I think I always see people stressing about, oh, this UCAT question isn't actually like our UCAT question. Any kind of question that is from previous UCAT, previously called UKCAT, then you'll be fine. Just go through those, get the technique down, take as much time as you want on each question, and then nearer the exam, just practice it in a timed manner on a computer. And then for BMAT, BMAT has a specification that you can find online. Just go through the specification and make sure you know, can tick off all the sort of subsections of that. Revise for it a little bit more like a real exam, because you have that spec, so you know what's going to come up, and the questions are more, can be right or wrong, whereas the thing is with you can't sit down where you can be like, oh yeah, when this question comes up, this is always what the answer is, because it's a bit more abstract. So, but you should be fine just staying at home preparing for the exam yourself, and yeah, just a cheap book online. And if you want to pay for a course which provides you UCAT questions, then feel free to do that as well, but you don't need to. How much time does it take to prep for the exam? Like I said, I would just say do little and often, especially for UCAT, because it's more about getting a feel for the questions. Don't sit there and pour like over it for like 4 hours a day. It's not necessary. Yeah, I remember sort of the summer leading up to my UCAT, I just booked a later UCAT test, and then the whole summer, as soon as I finished whatever exams I had at the time, just went straight, got myself a book, and just, you know, would do like 15 minutes a day or something of UCAT, and that worked for me. Just little and often, I think it's just important, but you know, you really don't need that much time. It's just about getting a feel for it, is however long that'll take for you. Like, it's sort of a tricky one to answer, but yeah, just do the questions. Yeah, so I think they were speaking about the recommendation letter or the reference letter. If that's what you were speaking about, then I think that's just something that you get a teacher to write about you and about what kind of student you are. I think. I'm not sure. I think I've answered all the questions. If you've got any more questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. If not, feel free to leave. Yes, I think so. I think that's what they were talking about. Thank you so much for answering the questions. No problem. I hope it was useful for you guys. And if you guys are leaving now, then good luck. And maybe I'll meet you in the future as doctors, hopefully. It's okay. Feel free to leave if you've had all your questions answered. It's okay. Thank you for coming. Goodbye. Good luck. It's okay. Thank you, guys. I'll just give you guys one more minute just in case you're typing, and then I'll end the webinar. Okay, thank you guys. Bye-bye.